Good morning, trainers! Welcome to day 2 of the Pokemon Regional Championships here in Bochum. My name is Amy, and we are joined with the lovely Alex Dow.
Yep, it's fantastic to be back again after 9 rounds of fantastic action that we had yesterday. And this is day 2, where we're going to have a further 5 rounds of Swiss, and then going into the top cut bracket. We do have 76 players that made it into our day 2. Like what we've said yesterday, it was a plethora of variation of decks that we're going to see and hopefully bring to you guys again today for some fantastic TCG action.
We're so excited to share some of the decks that we've got today. Some really interesting contenders made it into day 2. We definitely have variety here, so anyone is in it to win it.
Yeah, and we've seen some of the players from yesterday that came onto stream also make it through into day 2 as well. But what we've got here for you right now are just some of the live standings of some of the highest placed players from yesterday's action. We have Edwin Mesman, who's been no stranger to the stream before, going a full 9-0 on a record for day 1, which is incredible. I wonder how many games he actually dropped in the end, and not just obviously no rounds, which is an incredible feat. Already within touching distance of a top 16, top 8 berth.
Yeah, it's not going to be difficult for them to make that final stretch, so I wish them the best of luck today. Hopefully we'll catch up with them at some point today.
Yeah, definitely. And as we continue going down, we've got some fantastic players again. Mauro Wandelo at 702, Alexander Stopel at 702 as well. And then we're moving into the 711 records, which are still fantastic, putting them on 22 points for already to move in to try and secure a spot in one of the top cut places. Some few names we saw: Sen, who unfortunately drew a little bit poorly on stream yesterday, but still been wrecking through with that Reggie's deck that he piloted. And as well, we got Brennan Kammerman, of course, who was on the stream as well. And your best friend, Alessandro, there, number 10, also on a 711 record.
Oh, it was such a pleasure meeting so many of these players yesterday, and I feel like we're going to fill in the gaps a little today, and I feel like we're definitely going to see a lot of these guys. So if you're interested in seeing how and why they really became this successful, we're going to see exactly why, because all the action is going to go down right here. Do not miss a thing.
Yeah, and we've already picked out a matchup for you guys for this morning. It's going to be a massive friend of the stream, or someone who's been part of the scene for quite some time now. David Hockman has come back into the game and has gone onto a 5-0-4 record. Also with Reggie's, which is a great deck as well, but it's great to see him back into the game. And he's going to be up against Tamao Takada, who's a very good friend of mine from the UK as well. Again, a very accomplished TCG player. Has tried his hand at VG a couple of times as well, but you know, he's seen the points threshold drop down a little bit and decided he's going to make a bit of a run for it, and he's gone straight into day 2.
He's certainly making a name for himself in that. I can see that he's trying very hard and he's succeeding.
Yeah, no, definitely. So Tamao was our last ever UK National Champion. And David Hockman, I've also known for quite some time as well. I met throughout the scene whenever we had the European Championships Cup that we used to play in the Netherlands year on year. Prior to all this massive regionals, we used to have a European tournament for everyone to turn up to. And it was one of the first times having the chance to meet him as well. But yeah, he's always been, you know, behind the scenes with Limitless, and it's been great.
He's been on the mics just like us before, so
exactly.
He's been casting, so we get to celebrate one of our other fellow casters.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fantastic matchup. You know, we've seen these 2 decks already, of course. Lugia having a number of maybe different techs that could throw himself in a better position against Reggie's, but at the same time, Reggie's just being able to do Reggie things. If it's able to get going, it can really start just kind of steamrolling a lot of decks out in the field. And that's what we've seen with David at the moment. You know, he's 5-0-4. He hasn't lost a round so far. And these players, they're going to be, it's going to be high level. We're going to look for that opportunity to really showcase their capabilities and see if they can really push forward for that top 8 or even further spot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see these Titans pilot those decks to perfection, because they both proved that they can do it many times over, and it's not stopping today. today.
No, definitely not. I think, if I recall correctly, Tamao in one of the most recent special events, maybe it was towards the end of last season in Milan, actually came second as well, just falling short of winning the Champions medal in that special event to Tord Reckliffe. So that's no real mean feat. And it's one of those that just, kind of, it happens. It's Tord.
It happens.
Yeah, and it was just, it is a final. Anything can happen in a game of Pokemon.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. It's going to be so interesting to see if these decks differ from what we saw yesterday, because we saw a couple of Regis and a couple of Lugia, but they were so different, and the way that the players approached the deck were different too. So if you haven't caught those pieces of footage, maybe head back later and watch those, because they were fantastic, and you'll be able to see the difference between today and yesterday too. Yeah,
and we're just going to hopefully find some time also to go through maybe some of the decks a bit later, just to give you a bit of an idea, a bit of a rundown potentially of what is out there in the field for day 2. Of course, with 76 players, there's so many different people bringing different types of variations of different decks. I think I've noticed on one of the PokeStats websites where it said someone was actually playing Lugia Vikavolt.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, we have so many interesting decks, literally like combinations of things that we've seen commonly. I've seen Zacian V-Star up there, so that was really thrilling to get through today too. There's a lot of players, but there's everything to play for today. The pressure is on. Yeah, so we are seeing just that, continual innovation where we can, despite it being a very mature format. And of course, us still being able to bring 2 very meta decks, or decks that are considered, at the top of the game still for this round 1, which we will be bringing you shortly, of course. But at the same time, Amy, anything you're going to look forward to for the rest of the day? Anything that you're hoping to see today as well? Honestly, I'd just like to see some of those beautiful little tech cards pay off in decks. I would love to see all of those get used. Yesterday, we saw so many instances of sort of cancelling Cologne happening and working. But then the comeback was so strong from that. It was so surprising to see that even the tech card didn't help. And in some instances, it was the opposite, where the tech card was the cincher, and that's what closed that game down. So it'll be interesting to see if they work for the players today, or if they're really a bit of a dead draw in their decks. So I'm really excited to see whether the consistency is winning the day, or the little tech cards bring it home. We really want to see whether those types of cards can really pay off and show their true value of why they've been included in certain decks, don't we? I mean, we've got a lot going to be hopefully showing as well today. We're going to try and touch a little bit on maybe the Knoxville regionals and see how things have gone over there. Of course, we've got other tournaments that have been going on. In Japan, we had the Champions League and a few, obviously, with a completely different format. Yeah, we're so lucky to almost get a glimpse into the future. It's like we're fortune tellers. We get to have a little look at maybe what our format could start to evolve into later on in the season. So that's really exciting, so that we can bring that to you guys later on. We've got those getting prepared. So it's going to be so exciting. We can have a little look. I've seen a little glimpse of sort of what's going on in Japan at the moment. And it's quite surprising. I was surprised not to see some of the decks that I was expecting, especially with like item lock being so prevalent now. Doesn't seem to be translating. Bayonet doesn't seem to be too popular right now. So I wonder whether our players and the difference here will be made, because quite often the metas are quite different. Yeah, no, definitely. It's always been interesting to see either maybe European or US players sometimes occasionally go across over to Japan, maybe have tried one of their events before, but we've seen a few Japanese players and other sort of Asian players also play in our circuit, of course. A number played in OCIC and had to bring sometimes bring their own take with certain decks as well, because it feels like a lot of times with their best of one format, they really just kind of enjoy the game so much that they're quite happy sometimes to just bring something that they're really just going to enjoy playing. And it kind of just shows that extra little bit of uniqueness and fun that the Japanese can sometimes bring to our deck list as well, and the kind of decks and matchups. But yeah, I'm really excited. The rotation format's always something that's going to be an interesting area because people can start to really shine with the deck building capabilities. Yeah, there's just some real innovation coming out of the woodworks. It's just really lucky that we get some insight from overseas initially, just to kind of give us a little bit of here's the small path that you can start to follow, but then we'll just
start spreading out.
Yeah. And of course, we do get that fantastic opportunity to have all of these events on the same weekend. Like, it's amazing that we get that communication, we get to see what's going on, and it's almost like little pocket betters. Everyone kind of has their shining stars that do better than others, and sometimes it could be luck, sometimes it's skill, sometimes a little bit of both, but it's interesting that we get to see everything happening at the same time and kind of unfolding, where we have the Japanese events, Knoxville, and here in Bochum.
Yeah, and it's been amazing for us to have the opportunity to cross over slightly as well, which is really cool. It was something we got to see. Just to give him a bit of a send-off, a bit of a highlight reel of how we've been doing over here as well. You know, it's just great to see that all of this is kind of connecting in such an amazing way, and that's what Pokemon has been able to do for all of us, hasn't it? So being able to bring all of us together, whether it's through TCG, VG, Pokemon Go, it's just such a great opportunity to kind of come together.
We're so lucky. Pokemon connects us all in fantastic ways, and if anything, this weekend is such a testament to that.
And yeah, here we go. So we are just about to prepare for our round one this morning of our regionals in Bochum, Germany. As our players there are facing one another, just shuffling up, getting things ready. Both players know each other quite well as well. Like I said, just being in the European scene for such a long time, everyone kind of has been floating around for a while now, and David's no stranger to Tamao, and likewise.
Yeah, it's so exciting to see some seasoned players. I'm sure this is going to be a laugh between the players as well. It's nice when people get along as well and they're not too shy around one another. And I think that happens often with these seasoned players, especially in day two, when, you know, a lot of people do make repeat appearances.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's just one of these things now, you know, they've made day two. They've got some points in the bag already in terms of trying to go for that qualification for the World Championships in August. So it's just going to be one of those things where now it's just, can they now push themselves a little bit further? Windows potentially 4 games because of the number of players that are in day two to potentially push them into top 8 contention or even top 16. You know, prizes are still on the line, whether it's some of the prize money or some of the booster box prizes, as well as additional CP for your World Championships qualification.
Yeah, there's everything to play for still. These players are going to be absolutely trying their hardest because we have so many more rounds to go today. Hopefully they're well rested because there's a long day ahead.
Yeah, and as we see both players now just placing their prizes, a quick look just over at David's side. Nothing too crazy. The Serena is obviously a nice consistency card, as well as that opportunity to gust up a Pokemon, as both players fist bump with Tamao.
Fist bump.
Tamao draws the first card, so he will be opening our round one of Bochum Regionals.
Whoa, strong start from Tamao. That's exactly what you want to see from a Lugia. Just first thing, an Archeops in the discount pile. Goodbye.
Yeah, and just one of those tech cards in the active spot already with that Dunsparce, removing that weakness from his Lugia, or sort of colorless Pokemon, I should say, which really does sort of inhibit sometimes of what David is able to do and some of the damage that David's able to do just by having that out already in play. Does mean it's susceptible to maybe an early KO if David is able to set up, but it's going to give some protection initially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not impossible and it's not unseen that Summoning Star could bring that Dunsparce back if knocked out too early. It depends how Tamao decides to use their resources and their energy. If they can get away with one Archeops, we saw it yesterday, it is possible to win matches with one Archeops. It's whether David can then use those Reggie Elekis, which most Reggie decks run a higher count of than the other Reggies, for good reason. So in this format, it's such a strong Pokemon with running the 2 different variants that have different attacks. It really gives flexibility to the deck.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just having that one-off card of the Reggie Eleki allowing to use that electromagnetic sonar, really gives you a bit more utility. As we saw when Sen was able to just keep going back and forth with those Serenas, let's just give him an opportunity there. Tamao also identifying, alongside, of course, his turn 1 of getting Lugia down as soon as possible. That Snorlax is coming into play. It's such a strong card. It's able to take a hit from a lot of single prizes and still put away and KO some as well because of that thumping Snore dealing 180 damage. It's just such a good Pokemon to have included in the Lugia deck now, alongside its inclusion in a lot of Lost Box variations as well, as Tamao just passes over with just a 1 Archeops in the discard for the time being.
Over to David to straight away attach that capture energy. Fishing out one of their other Reggies. They're having a quick deck search to make sure that they know exactly what are in those prize cards. But as we've already analyzed, they're not that damning. We seem okay in those. They're pretty well spread across the resources that he has. So hopefully just picking them up slowly throughout the game should really benefit David here.
Yeah, and with no Reggie's prize, this is his first search. Again, so that opportunity to just identify what actually has been prized. Does he have access to all the pieces of the puzzle for his turn? As he continues to play and gets another Reggie's out with that quick ball as well, and energy hits the discard, which is fantastic. You know, it's at least starting to get a few of those pieces going.
Yeah, the engine begins. Here we go.
There you go. It's one of those where it's just so many parts that have to happen and come together with Reggie's. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, if it does sort of come together, and there's already 4 of the Reggies, and he just also played a scoop up net there so that he can use Dragon's Horde for as much value as possible. But once it does come together, it's just so much value you can get just bringing all those energies back from the discard and use the variety of attackers and different potential weaknesses that you can hit with.
Yeah, the beauty of Reggie's really is that when you've got that energy in the discard pile, it's relentless. As long as Regigigas is out, you can just keep loading up energy on Pokemon every single turn. It just doesn't let up at all. So as soon as it's ready to rumble, it just keeps going, and it puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. We see a heavy ball there, so David knows what's in the prize cards now. I'm sure they're not too worried, so hopefully... I don't think there are any Pokemon in there either, so I don't believe they get to take anything, but having a good analysis, that's for sure.
No, and again, another player who's used to also picking up and taking notes for just understanding and remembering what's actually available to him as well. It's kind of just helps to reinforce that knowledge that you can get when you do your deck searches. And when you play Hisuian Heavy Ball, it's just so much information to know what actually is in there. And so you're not, again, really sort of digging for a particular card. But I feel like it's a really strong turn from David. You know, he's been able to get all these Pokemon down with the capture energy, the quick ball, and then also have a research to play as well. So he had a fresh new 7 cards. And it's just one of those where typically it just has to always be a little bit slow, but that's just the name of the game with Reggie's, unfortunately. And it looks like Tamao's just eyeing up some way to disrupt David where possible, and down comes a Marnie.
Yeah, Tamao's in a pretty good situation here. 1 Archeops in the bin already, Lugia with an energy, Snorlax hopefully not too sleepy like our feature game with Jackhold yesterday.
And it looks like a pretty good hand. I see an Evo Incense and an Ultra Ball there as well. May have to discard an energy or 2, but theoretically that is possible to get the 2 Archeops into the discard and a Lugia V-Star going as well. So let's just see how Tamao is going to play this out, because he does have to potentially sacrifice some energies. But at the same time, this means he will be set up and will be looking to try and start the prize race as soon as possible. As you see there, Tamao's just eyeing up which of his targets he's going to use with that Ultra Ball. Looks like that Aurora energy is being eyed up, because that capture energy allows him to get another useful variety of cards for this matchup as well. So there goes the second Archeops. And the capture energy has chosen it. Wants to keep the Aurora for the different types of attackers in terms of the energy cost that are available to himself. As the Lugia V-Star does come down, ready to use that amazing V-Star ability. And there, David's just supporting him there and giving him the Archeops ready for that bench.
There's Summoning Star doing its job. And we head into the deck for the first Primal Turbo of the day. I'm sure there'll be many on the tables out there. So really exciting to be going. Both decks seem to have had a really good start. They're doing their thing. David's a little bit behind, but only because of the turns.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's that's why at the moment it's quite a massive advantage to going first, particularly with decks like Lugia or sometimes with DTE Mew, where you have to kind of evolve up before you're really able to do too much. But at the same time, Tamal's identifying he's going to go for that Snorlax, making sure that DTE is, the detriment of the DTE is nullified by that powerful energy also being attached. And it looks like the second Archeops for that capture energy to that Dunsparce, just so he can pivot out the way. And he's going to start with that thumping Snore, I suspect, with the Snorlax going in the active spot as soon as possible.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit yesterday about how advantageous these single prizes are in decks like Lugia. Lugia's almost the support character here. They're just there to see everybody along, bring them onto the bench, have a little party, and then everyone's ready to go. So against a deck like David's, where it is entirely single prize, Tamal can kind of play this like a single prize game from now onwards. And
that's a double heads from Tamal as well. No staying asleep for the Snorlax. That's Tamal must be feeling a massive relief.
They trained that Snorlax well.
Yeah, that picture of that Snorlax, despite still lying down, is going to be awake and very likely to be able to still stay in the active spot. Of course, could go down to this Regigigas in the active spot right now, because it does deal the 150 damage from its Gigaton break attack. But that does put a bit of a clock on David right now on how he's able to now maneuver his turn to be able to retaliate back into that Snorlax. But yeah, massive for Tamal after that thumping Snore, which has that unique effect of having to flip 2 coins or roll 2 dice, and 2 heads are required to wake up instead of the usual 1.
And I think that's the first time we've seen the Snorlax wake up.
Yeah, it's very true.
Oh my goodness, he must be hungry for Reggies.
Yeah, he's woken up and it's breakfast time. for that Snorlax.
Snorlax, it is the first game of the day. I understand Snorlax.
Yeah, I think that was that Amani as well now from David. So he's just kind of looked to try and disrupt himself. Tamal's side, he doesn't really mind at this point. You know, the majority of his turns will be trying to activate that Primal Turbo and starts getting a number of attackers ready. As we see David with the Regieleki and the speed energy, so that means he's able to draw additional cards. Does have the full set of Reggies now on the board, so that means Ancient Wisdom is active and live.
Yeah, so finally David can start to accelerate their energy, but do they have enough in the discard pile? We've only seen a couple in there.
I think it was maybe an Aurora, maybe a Capture energy that was attached to the Regidrago. That was in the active spot that was knocked out. Does mean that this Regigigas is staring down at that Snorlax going, I'm not going to be able to do too much, potentially. And I think David's also looking at his discard and just double-checking. Does have a gift energy there as well, but is there a way to pivot out? No, unfortunately not.
Pass the turn.
Yeah, it's one of those where just short of being set up correctly to be able to do what he needs to.
So close yet so far, but at least they have that ready Regieleki on the bench. Now, even if Regieleki gets targeted down here, Ancient Wisdom can still be activated if David manages to get another, and it is the highest count of Regi in their deck, so putting the energy on it is relatively risk-free.
Yeah, so David did go for the play where, of course, if he's able to just get those Regis, you know, he'd have a Regigigas being able to attack. It's another one of those Regis that we've seen in a few lists or variations where you do play the additional third copy as well, because it's such an important card in a variety of matchups, not just as an attacker, but of course as the main energy acceleration. Players are just having a conversation, just double-checking the exact movements of some of the actual cards itself. But yeah, the Regigigas, if it goes down, there is just the one remaining in the actual deck as well. But at the same time, with a number of ordinary rods, what we're going to be seeing is all these Regis keep coming back where possible. And I think Amani is just kind of being shown. I guess we'll just let the players and the judges sort out any sort of slight concerns that some of the players have, as Tamal's just used the Evo Incense for that additional Archeops, which he won't need anymore. in a similar state of those battle VIP passes. You're now just looking for opportunities to get it out of your deck and just removing it where possible. So yeah, we'll just bring you the action straight back in due course, just as our players and judges are just double checking.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to have a double check of the board state, make sure that everything's correct and going well. So yeah, it seems like a strong start from both players though.
Yeah.
I think even though we didn't see an attack from David's side that turn, again, we've analysed how single prize decks don't necessarily need that early momentum. They have the opportunity to just chill and take their time and then come back for revenge later on those double prizes.
No, exactly that. And of course with Tamao, you know, that first turn, all he really needed to do was get that Lugia down and just start getting those Archeops into the discard. And he was able to do that by turn 2 and, you know, just use that Summoning Star ability, get fully set up, and now has been attacking with the Snorlax as well as getting the double heads to wake up. So both players in a really quite a favorable position to be in any matchup. And it's just now down to how it's going to be back and forth between the two players when we get back.
Both of them are set up. Both of them are raring to go, so we can build up the hype because they are ready to rumble. This is where the prize cards are going to be shaken.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, you know, just to kind of go back and touch on those sort of judge calls again, sometimes a lot of players typically don't always maybe ask the question. It's always good because we're very fortunate on Stream Games that we do have a table judge there. There are judges who do a great job on the field as well, and they are there to support and help make the game and the experience as great as possible. So don't ever be afraid. If there's something you're unsure about, just to give them a call at the same time because they are there to help as much as possible. You know, of course, more often than not, the experience I've had with playing against others, I've had a great time, and also, you know, honesty's amazing amongst the community as well. But it's just if there's something you're unclear about, they're there for you.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have such a fantastic professor program. We have amazing judges from all over the world. I'm sure somebody would be more than happy to help you out. We did our interview yesterday with Seb, the judge, and he was so friendly. Honestly, they love taking any questions, no matter how big or small. They're more than happy to help out. Even if you're not in a game, if you just have a question like, how many points do I need to do well today? How many more matches do I need to win? Any question. Everyone's new at some point, and there's no shame in going and asking a simple question.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think one of the cool things that we get as Europeans, we get to play with European cards and European regionals as well. So sometimes there's some cards which you may not have seen before, need a quick translation. The judges can also support and help with that as well. As we go back into our action, Tamao's got his deck back in hand, just shuffling up. Everything's all, I believe, hopefully is clarified now as we're able to continue progressing through the game, which is great to see again. As we do see the thumping snore, it looks like, and Tamao's getting ready to use those dice to see if he's able to wake up back to back, and it's a first tails, and Tamao doesn't even throw the second dice.
Not as lucky that time, sadly.
Yeah, we've seen on other streams before, even things like OCIC, I think I saw 1 or 2 players had maybe back-to-back waking up from that thumping snore attack, which is just such a scary thing to see if you're an opponent seeing a Snorlax just come back and back and back and just keep snoring back at me for 180 damage.
Exactly, and yet we move on to David's turn. Obviously, we had to say goodbye to Regigigas, but they have more, so hopefully they'll be able to get that live again. But it's not too much of a concern. They're going for the attack on Oh, they went for the discard to do 120 damage, I believe it is, to Dunsparce on the bench, getting rid of the weakness guard.
Yeah, I haven't seen Tamao potentially. Did he attempt to try and wake up once again, coming back into his turn yet? I wasn't quite sure.
We may have missed the die roll. We may have missed it.
Yeah, but that Astral Radiance Regieleki, as you mentioned, that 120 damage, that targeted bolt attack, being able to discard 2 lightning energy from this Pokemon, and it does 120 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So now, those Lugias or other colorless Pokemon that are on Tamao's side of the board are susceptible to being hit for weakness. There's no real recovery that you typically see in Lugia lists, which means that Dunsparce is not coming back.
It's really scary too because David has Regirock. which is also super effective to Tamau's Snorlax and Stoutland.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, Tamau must have done the die roll already coming back into his turn. He did have to just, of course, pass back over. And this time, the double die roll did hit double heads and has just been manied straight back from David as soon as possible there, as David will be looking to try and find that Regigigas once again. Does have that extra utility, of course, because that Regieleki can use electromagnetic sonar and just grab a trainer card from a discard pile to put it straight back into your hand.
Alternatively, only one touch for turn, and they could go ahead and do another 120 damage to one of the bench Pokemon.
Yep, start setting up that Lugia is an option as well. Also sort of puts the energy into the discard pile, given that opportunity to then just get those energies for the Ancient Wisdom from the Regigigas, but David does just choose to take the Quick Ball from the discard pile and to put back into hand, readying the next turns.
Yeah, getting ready, because I think they're hoping maybe they won't see a knockout, or maybe they have another Regieleki in hand already, and then they can go and grab the last Regi piece of the puzzle from the deck with that Quick Ball. So back over to our fantastic Lugia player.
Yeah, so Tamau has just discarded that Lugia V there, of course. Doesn't want to give more double prize Pokemon onto the bench for David to be able to try and snipe and take out, just kind of minimizing those opportunities. Tamau will be looking maybe to start utilizing some of those single prizes he's got on his board as well. We spoke about it yesterday. Archeops is also a fantastic attacker. And with a decent amount of HP as well, in a similar vein to that Snorlax. 150, of course, isn't a basic, but because it's an evolved Pokemon, it's got that extra HP to give it that extra shot of staying alive and not being knocked out or return knocked out. There we see the thumping snore, the immediate tails. It's almost correct right now. Tamau has pretty much gone 50-50 with waking up here.
It has been. Yeah, that dice is definitely doing as it should. It's an interesting point to bring up that Manaphy is in Tamau's prize cards, though, because now that they lack Dunsparce, the bench damage that David is able to do is quite damning. So the not having access to that Manaphy is huge.
Yeah, exactly, and it's great that you picked that out because it is in the prizes as you just mentioned there. It's another one of those tech cards that have been fitted into Lugia where possible, but it causes like awkward scenarios. So at some point, it might be that Tamau maybe puts that down to start to limit some of those sniping capabilities of David, but then you time it at a different time with the Dunsparce, so you can kind of make David switch game plans and just cause a bit of, I really like using this word, chaos on your opponent's side of the board. But, you know, we've seen it in and out of decks, the Manaphies and the Dunsparces for the Lugia's list, depending on how they feel around what they're going to be going up against. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting inclusion. Of course, does have that amazing rare Yveltal in his prizes as well, but less likely to be used because it's such a heavy energy cost. I just realized as we're talking, it is David's turn right now. It did look like he had another research. Does have that gift energy also on that Regigigas. That Snorlax has been sat in that active spot for quite some time now.
It has. It's been sleeping away absolutely fine, but it looks like David's going for it this turn with the weakness now that Dunsparce is removed.
Yeah, that Regirock in the active spot does have an attack that deals 140 damage, Giga Impact for 2 fighting and 1 colorless. It does have a little bit of effect of that attack where during your next turn it's unable to attack. But with those 3 energies already attached, if it does get knocked out with that gift energy, David's going to continue drawing more cards, but also can just retreat, and then David can use another attacker to maybe deal with whatever Tamau is going to bring to the active spot. But now brings David's prizes down to 4. Tamau still slightly ahead with 3, of course. There could be a pivotal turn soon where David will look to try and maybe knock out this Lugia in the active spot right now. And sort of try to level up the prize race.
Yeah, it's interesting to see David's in a really quite strong position here, as Tamau hasn't managed to get any other attackers ready apart from Lugia being 2 prize cards. If you knock it out because it's a V-star, it could be quite worrisome here. if they don't manage to deal with the electric types, or trying to make it so that David cannot recycle one of those Reggies back onto the bench.
Yeah, and Tamal will be starting to look at some of his energies that he's been using throughout this matchup so far, because that Snorlax had one of those DTEs that he plays, obviously playing a 2-copy, did have one of those powerful energies also. So as you can start to kind of work out, there's a number of energies beginning to be utilized in different matchups, or this whole matchup, sorry. And David is also just double checking, I reckon, some of those energy attachments at the same time. Again, just double checking the energy attachments. One was from the Primal Turbo, one looked like to be coming from hand as well. And there's a second Primal Turbo before Tamal looks to try and maybe utilize a supporter to draw into better and more cards as well. There's a few other options that are available for Tamal, considering his board state. He does also have access to a Radiant Charizard, which is obviously another amazing attacker. Again, a good amount of HP, but also can be utilized with that heat energy to really put it out of range from a Reggie's attack.
I think Tamal's in a really strong position here because they've just set up 3 attackers and they have 3 prize cards left. So they're in quite a strong position. If they took a knockout with this Lugia and then the 2 Archeops, they've taken all their prize cards, as long as they can do their best to avoid too many knockouts from David in the meantime.
Yeah, it looks like Tamal will just have to take back-to-back knockouts at this stage, as you mentioned, which you correctly called out, because it is just 3 prize cards remaining. If he's able to announce an attack here, take a knockout, use the 2 Archeops once he's able to power them up, because they do a base damage, I believe, of 120, and then with the powerful energies attached to both of them right now, 140, so they will also be knocking out each and any one of those Reggies on David's board as well. There is only one thing that David could potentially try and do to limit that. Does play 1 Cape of Toughness, which is a way to maybe put it out of range. But Tamal will then be looking to try and utilize that lost vacuum as soon as possible. So let's just see how both of these players are going to draw. Tamal's in a really strong position. It's just 2 more announcements of attacks back to back, and he will be able to take game 1. Whereas David will also need to knock out 3 Pokemon at this current stage, including that big Lugia in the active spot. And there's an Ordinary Rod coming down to try and replenish those Reggies back into the deck and back onto the board as soon as possible.
Yeah, Reggie's biggest strength is that ability to just keep recycling their resources. And so any deck that tries to inhibit those is really going to do quite well against it. But Lugia doesn't have a lot of ability to stop your opponent. Lugia is quite selfish in that regard. It's looking at its own board and it's focusing on what it's doing, not what your opponent's doing. And it doesn't have a lot of disruption other than Marnie for that. So usually Lost Vacuum in Lugia is used for removing stadiums, but again for your own agenda more so than removing them to stop your opponent having access to things. Yeah,
definitely. And there we do see the first Dragon Shoes into a Speed Energy into another Dragon Shoes. David's just been digging all his way through to look for a way of getting another one of his Reggies down so he can have the full set down again. That Regirock sort of hiding away in the deck currently. He's played down the Ultra, does hold the Cape of Toughness in hand right now, so there could be a pivotal turn here or soon where he's just going to try and put himself out of range, because that's the one way that David will be able to sort of even up the prize race and maybe push himself ahead of Tamal.
David could even start to stop Tamal from being able to boss by maybe playing a Path to the Peak to stop Luminion from working, which would be amazing to see if they can just fully take control of the game from this turn onwards. They can turn it around.
Yeah, there's a number of cards that still need to be played across both players' turns. Of course, Tamal will also have access at some point, or hoping to have access at some point, to maybe a boss. Maybe that's another way round the Cape of Toughness as well. David already has the choice belt on the active Regieleki, the Evolving Skies Regieleki, which is played in a 2-of because of that great Terra Spark attack, dealing 120 and discarding all the electric energy from this Pokemon will also deal 40 to 2 bench Pokemon. So it's just an extra great utility attacker, being able to help snipe and set up other Pokemon on the bench as well. But this means with that choice belt, he will be dealing 300 damage with a ×2 weakness and 1-hit KOing this Lugia in the active spot, should he choose to do so, of course. And I'd be a little bit concerned if he didn't.
I feel like Reggie's is the deck that we can get collectors all playing Pokemon TCG, because you basically do a little collection on the board.
Yeah,
I feel like we can get them all into Pokemon TCG this way. We can get them all playing, guys.
Yeah, we've seen already a number of players who've kind of just pick up things like that, and yeah, he's just eyeing up with the choice belt, the discard of the 2 speed energies. Does leave that gift energy, which is a fantastic inclusion into the Reggie's deck, which has made it so strong in recent times. And dealing that extra 40 to the 2 Archeops as well. So Tamal's just deciding which one to promote. He chooses to do so with the one which only has the 1 powerful energy on it. You know, he has access to Primal Turbo despite being Mardied in previous turns. Now it's just interesting to see how Tamal is able to navigate around that Cape of Toughness, because I can only imagine that David will look to bring it up, but we do see Tamal instantly with that Lost Vacuum just in the hand.
Yep, down it goes. And, is that their last card in hand, though?
It looks like he's trying to pick something up there.
Oh, no, he does have some. I was going to say, goodness, that's unusual.
Yeah,
but no, there they are.
And despite usually having to have a Lost Zone counter for you guys, this deck doesn't really rely on that, so we don't have that at the moment. But Tamal does have that amazing rare Yveltal underneath his V-Star marker right there, just kind of showcasing that he does have a card there Lost Zoned from his own Lost Vacuum. But that does mean that Cape of Toughness is now out of action, which means with just an additional powerful energy, even that Regigigas can go down to a Archeops. But of course, Tamal should still have access to that Radiant Charizard as well. With David already taking so many prizes, Radiant Charizard, again, has been a very splashable card in a number of decks where you can maybe just include a Fire Energy. But that Excited Heart ability being able to allow you to use, in a similar way to that Drapion V, the Combustion Blast attack with less energies attached. But here we go with Tamal. Just eyeing up that Oranguru from the Quick Ball as well. Just thinking, I'm just going to stick with the Archeops. This should do me to really get me over the line with my final 2 prizes.
Yeah, they seem to have managed their energy quite well in this game. As long as they've got one to give to Archeops, then we're all good. This could seal the deal. Is
the Oranguru on the bench? He's just kind of sat there above the Archeops right now. Because Tamal has played the Marnie. We'll just, I guess, double check, because otherwise that Oranguru is in a weird support role across the attack.
Yeah, there we are. He's on the bench.
Yeah, I think both players realised. I think David was just double checking that was there as well.
Yeah.
Both players just, again, making sure their board state is as clean as possible so that we can all follow alongside them at the same time. So there's the Oranguru ability, swapping a card with a top deck. There's the Charizard. Lovely art, by the way. I love the Dark Charizard there. Getting ready, potentially, to come into the game if necessary. Right now, it's just not needed, as the Archeops can do the business.
Yeah, Archeops is still a really strong attacker, especially in these single prize matchups. It's easy to see that it can become quite aggressive on its own, even though it's typically seen as a support Pokemon. It's still not to be ignored, and it's proving it.
Yeah, definitely that speed wing attack, being able to knock out that Regieleki. Now, David is in a spot where, you know, Tamal only needs to take 1 more prize. That Regigigas has the most HP of all the Regis. But is that enough to see David through a turn of being able to take and tank a hit? Would be interesting to see.
We'll have to see if that gift energy gave David what they need.
Yeah, there's I'm really interested in seeing his hand and how he's going to potentially play this one out. You know, like I mentioned, he's got that Regigigas in the active spot now, really just powering up. And there's the Ancient Wisdom, the plethora of energies, those 5 energies that go onto the Regigigas, takes out the knockout on the Archeops, and now it's just over to Tamal. He just needs 1 prize here, has the powerful energy in hand. And that's enough with the 120 plus 20 from a powerful energy, plus 20 more. That brings up to 160 damage, which means Tamal attacker that will take game 1 of our round 1 in day 2 of Regionals Bochum.
They really brought that back. It looked like it could have gone either way for a lot of that game. Oh my goodness, the Regis just got going so quickly, but those discards really early on of those Archeops really helped them out.
Yeah, definitely, and I was glad to see that we were able to sort out any sort of judge issues or concerns there. Both players just making sure that their board states were as clean as possible from then onwards, and it was easy for us to follow at the same time as well. You know, you very quickly identified that Tamao only needed to take those 3 prizes and just basically announce an attack, turn on, turn on, turn. David was able to try and find his pieces to try and limit that where possible, but Tamao just had all the combo pieces that he needed with that lost vacuum.
Yeah, he did, and just kept going and never gave up. And honestly, although Tamao had a really clear line of sight for their prize journey, they were still able to make sure that they were refreshing their hand and checking that they had everything in their toolbox so that whatever David threw at them, they were able to respond.
Yeah, and David, you know, both players set up really well. We touched on this a moment ago as well, but both players being able to essentially set up their board within a couple of turns. I think David maybe took 1 extra turn to do so, but at the same time, he pretty much had every piece there available to him. And it was just then back and forth. He targeted down that Dunsparce pretty quickly, being able to then sort of open and utilize that weakness where possible. I think that Snorlax just did its job so well in waking up that it was able to take a couple of KOs. And putting David on a bit of a back foot. If it was able to stay asleep, maybe an extra turn, David may have had an extra turn to be able to then, once taking out the Dunsparce, start targeting down what Pokemon he needs to. But we do go back to our action, of course, both our players just setting up for game 2. David is likely to be going first, I would believe, but as we can just see on our prizes here, again, nothing too crazy for both players.
Yeah, I mean, notably the only thing that could be an issue might be that powerful energy, but I think being almost halfway up the prizes, we might be okay, because by the time it's needed, it might be accessible.
This is the one thing that might inhibit Tamao's setup for a while. It's just an energy attachment and pass from David. Tamao does start the Pumpkaboo in the active slot, has a hefty retreat cost, but also is Tamao's out to a card that David plays 4 copies of, that Path to the Peak, to try and limit those opportunities for Lugia to use that V-Star power.
Yeah, Pumpkaboo's ability only matters when it hits the field, so unfortunately Pumpkaboo's never going to be able to activate that ability. It's rather a sitting duck.
Yeah, so Tamao will be looking for any other opportunity to maybe try and get that Lugia V-Star Summoning Star ability as soon as possible, prior to maybe David getting hold of a Path to the Peak, because if that hits the field, Tamao would then have to dig a little bit further for stuff like that Lost Vacuum to be able to kind of put himself in a position to really get his deck going once again. As you can see, Tamao is able to use in his first search, first deck search, just kind of double checking what energy does he have access to. He's just double checking those powerful energies. He's already seen how useful they are in terms of just using his own single prizes to attack. So at the moment, Tamao will be potentially a little bit relieved that David hasn't really done too much from his first turn. Sometimes that just happens. Maybe David does have a research in hand, but because it's his first turn, wasn't able to play a support, and Tamao does get a little bit of a grace period to try and just get set up where possible.
Yeah, although Lugia didn't get to go first, if David has a slow start, then it can just not matter, thankfully. But if David does manage to get that Path to the Peak down on this turn, it could be critical. Yeah, it's really important here as Tamao does attach his own Aurora energy, discarding that Serena, and does look to... the hand is interesting.
Yeah, he was deciding whether he wanted to play that money, but that for a first turn for Lugia, that's all he really needs to do, is just get the Lugia down. Based on David's position, it's very unlikely for him to get Gust and also get the Regielekis ready to maybe hit it for weakness, and there's a Marnie there from David, which Tamao was getting ready to use himself anyway.
But it's not good for Tamao, popping both Lugia V-Star and their deck to the very bottom, but thankfully there was an Ultra Ball right there.
There is, but we do see the Path to the Peak come down.
Oh no!
So David does have one piece of the puzzle to try and limit what Tamao is able to do on his next turn. But yeah, because with Ultra Balls in hand, Tamao won't have access to anything like the Luminion V to try and get himself out of trouble either.
No.
So it might be a bit of a top deck mode here for Tamao initially to say the least.
Oh no, it could be bad. Pumpkaboo can't do its job. They definitely didn't have that lost vacuum in hand, but we can top deck and pray, right?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't see it at the bottom 3 cards, so it's got to be somewhere in the top 40 or so.
Oh no! Oh, an Archeops though. That's interesting. They might be able to get another one gone for utilization later.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with those double Ultra Balls, it's just kind of good to get those Archeops out of hand anyway, in case Davidendus finds a way to maybe Marnie him again. But, you know, Tamau's got to play this quite carefully. If he does play the Ultra Ball, he's going to shuffle those 3 cards at the bottom that he knows aren't Lost Vacuum back around the deck at the same time. Small percentages go a long way so when you play Pokemon, and it's just one of those where you have to consider so many different things, as we do see the Radiant Charizard also hit the discard as well alongside that Archeops. So now just kind of working out what he could do here. Starting that Pumpkaboo really just hasn't helped him, unfortunately.
No, and it becomes a bit of a sitting duck if David gets set up too, where they can do bench damage, and Pumpkaboo's only got 60 HP. Yeah,
it's just... and like I said, it's really difficult to actually retreat out of with 2 energy retreat costs to really maneuver out of the active spot. There's we couldn't quite see what Tamau may have grabbed from that Ultra Ball, but he has grabbed from the capture energy. Looks like he's eyeing up that Manaphy this time.
Yeah, I think knowing that he's got a slower start on this one and David could run away with it, I think that's a really smart decision, knowing that he needs to bide his time.
Yeah, and I think you correctly called it out as well. With that Pumpkaboo in the active spot, David doesn't have to really deal with it. He can just continue trying to maybe snipe around that Pumpkaboo in that awkward spot and cause a lot of damage to Tamau's side of the field. So Tamau might have identified exactly what you just said as well and just went, if you are going to have to take a Pokemon out, you're having to knock out this Pumpkaboo for me.
Yeah, I'm putting this as a wall between you and me right now.
Yeah, this 60 HP wall will do something.
It's not a bad decision. It's a clever play, no matter how Tamau decides to progress. But David equally doesn't seem to have a lot going on in regards to setup yet. That quick ball is a nice start. They're probably able to hopefully get the Draco. Oh, they've gone for the Lecky rather than card draw. It's really interesting. Oh, no, the Draco's already down, so they are just struggling to get that Registeel out of the active, presumably.
Yeah, and at the moment, yeah, David hasn't really got too much going because I think he did Regigate for that Regidrago as well, which is another great attack to use when you need to. And I guess that's the reason why he went for the Regieleki, because he did have speed energy in hand. Lots of utility moments in these decks. Additional draw where possible is fantastic, because as we've always mentioned, Regi's has some concerns around its consistency and sort of getting set up, because it does need all of those pieces. But when you have just little auxiliary draw cards like that, like the speed energy, when you can attach it to a Regieleki, again, that's why you play a free copies of them. Despite being quite a good attacker as well, it really sort of helps the deck just kind of progress where possible. I think Tamau just drew a card there and just passed back over.
Oh no, this could spell disaster.
It's just one of those where Tamau can't really do too much more right now other than just kind of wait and look for a piece of the puzzle himself. David will need to start trying to apply as much pressure as possible here.
I think David was checking there exactly what Lugia V does. I'm sure they're familiar with the first attack, but obviously checking that second attack isn't a threat to them is actually really important, because Lugia does have other attacks.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess with Tamau, he may have an opportunity later as well, because that Dunsparce isn't prize. He could maybe give himself a bit more of a chance by maybe grabbing the Dunsparce, maybe using Read the Wind to draw some cards to kind of get going into the actual game itself. So again, it really comes down to how David's going to be able to apply pressure and how Tamau's going to be able to react in a very precarious position, simply because he just doesn't seem to be able to maybe just get out of this path to the peak right now.
No.
As we do see a second Registeel come down. I guess David just wants to make sure if some movements, some special little movements that might be available to him, will be able to kind of navigate around and start trying to apply pressure from his own board state as well. I guess he's kind of maybe a bit concerned whether that Lugia comes up and starts taking a KO as an option.
Yeah, although David seems to have completely stifled Tamo's momentum in this game, he seems to have stifled himself a little bit there. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe he didn't intend on Reggie. Oh, but he had a scoop up now, so it's all good.
Yeah, I think David's kind of realized he wasn't too sure what he was thinking, maybe. But
I think it might work out, though. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe we're reading into it too much.
I hope so, but I think both players are in good spirits, so they're just yeah. I think David didn't. Maybe missaw the Reggies on his board because he's just had to research away that Reggie Steel. He's just scoop up net into the Reggie Drago, unfortunately, as well. But, you know, plenty of recovery in the deck to bring it back. But I think David noticed pretty quickly that, oh, actually, that's a second Reggie Steel.
I needed a Reggie Rock, I think. Yeah. But he's passed the turn by the looks of it, so Tamao now has an opportunity to maybe bring it back. Let's hope that top deck was good. Looks like a card's being played. Snorlax is back.
He's found a Snorlax. His friend is back. He's just, played it down and passing back over. You know, keeping up with the pace of play, which is great. You know,
we saw how effective Snorlax was last game as just a wall, something to wall out the Reggies, even when they're set up and ready to rumble. Snorlax can still take a decent amount of hits and just kind of allow Tamo to hang in there.
Yeah, and we do see a couple of the tools come down as well. That Cable Toughness not really being able to put too much work in the last game because that instant lost vacuum. I guess David is going for the jugular and just going to keep researching away his cards. Tamao's going to double check what resources have gone. There's another Regieleki, a Reggie Drago, a Reggie, Regi, sorry. So there are at least 4 Reggies in there now.
And lots of scoop up nets. That was a big hand.
Yeah, and the boss's order as well. But David does find the Reggie Rock now and does attach that gift energy and the 2 Auroras to the Reggie Drago, now capable of using its own attack. Giant Fangs for 1 grass, 1 fire, and 1 colorless. Deals 160 damage, which is actually quite a good retaliation attack back onto Tamao's side of the board. But this puts now a little bit of pressure on how Tamao will play this turn out.
Yeah, Pumpkaboo's gone finally, and Lugia takes the top spot. And looks like that.
It's just a read the win. This is a really tough spot here for Tamao, which, because that Lugia is just going to be staring down potentially to a Regieleki attacker on the bench. And as David just instantly retreats straight into it, has Ancient Wisdom to repower it back up with all those Aurora energies. And Tamao does scoop up the game, and I think it does go to a 1-1 record now in this series of our round 1. David there, I think, just also feeling a little bit apologetic because he saw that he put the double Reggie Steel down at the same time. But congrats to David being able to... Congrats to David, able to sort of limit Tamao's game plan just with that 1 path to the peak.
Yeah, it's just proof of the pudding, really, of how effective that can be. The Pumpkaboo start was obviously the ideal situation for David. They probably immediately thought, fantastic. Yeah. Here we go. They can't stop my path to the peak, although David runs 4, so it's still a valid tactic, even when Pumpkaboo is in the deck. But having that ability so early, knowing they can stop that Summoning Star is huge.
Yeah, Summoning Star, the Luminium V being stopped as well, so no extra ways of Tamao sort of finding himself out in that sticky situation. But it just means that we've seen before how prevalent Marnie path is. And it's still here. It's still back in the game.
That disruption is next level. It's really key to this game right now, and it makes a huge difference to the way that people deck build.
Yeah, it's, I mean, particularly with a deck like Reggie's, because there's so many other stadiums that kind of stop it from working as well. So things like the Temple of Sinnoh, which kind of limits the amount of attackers that are available on Reggie's side of the board, but by just having a way of disrupting your opponent, you know, you're already a deck which maybe isn't the most consistent sometimes to getting set up, but as long as you maybe brick a little as well. I mean, you're just at the same level of consistency. Once Reggie gets going, you're able to just kind of start swinging your way through different matchups. As we see now, both players beginning to place their prizes. Remember, it is 1-1 right now. We still had a little bit of time left, so we'll see how both players are able to maneuver through this matchup and see if anyone is able to take the W and an additional 3 points for their day 2 run.
Yeah, this is where the time crunch really comes into play. So let's see if either of these players can get an early win or whether it's going to be a slog to the finish line.
Yeah, and we see, again, I don't see, just a very quick glance, nothing too crazy from either side. Tamao does open with that amazing rare Raikou, which we haven't seen yet. In this sort of matchup. Does have a heavy retreat cost, but has a really cool attack. That amazing shot, dealing 120 to the active, but also 120 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon as well.
Yeah, there's some really interesting decision-making to go on in this hand as well. There's lots of ways to get Pokemon, but it's going to be about sequencing to see exactly how those are going to come into play.
Was it a Quick Ball, an Ultra Ball, a Capture Energy?
Yeah, really fantastic amount. Not quite perfect because there's no way to get that perfect double Archeops. But a Lumineon in hand for next turn does ready the potential of a Professor's Research. So it's definitely possible within the time frame that Tamao wants to be able to get those Archeops in the discard pile before V-Star time. Yeah,
Tamao's opted to Quick Ball away the Capture Energy because of the other discards he may have to use already. He's just double checking all of those energy resources that are available to him. We'll notice that one Aurora is prized, so maybe he'll be thinking, thankfully I didn't discard the Aurora as well, because despite having to set up, he needs to use that Aurora if he wants to utilize that Raikou attack, because it is able to take out one of the Reggies. You know, one of the Reggies does have only 120 HP.
Yeah.
And it is that Reggie Alecki that often hits the field rather than the Astral Radiance one. So the Evolving Skies only has 120 HP, which means that Raikou can just potentially set up an attack on another Reggie's, but also take out a Reggie Alecki and still be able to just keep attacking and take prizes for Tamao. Does have another Capture Energy hand, so maybe that was the easier choice.
Oh, there goes the early Dunsparce, which proved really effective in Game 1.
Yeah, really important card to try and protect those Lugias where possible, and maybe even a Snorlax as well, because then David has to go for the Regidrago or the Regigigas to attack to deal enough damage to knock it out. So Tamao identifying now, he doesn't have to worry about that Pumpkaboo in the active just being a bit of a wall for his own side of the board and getting a Manaphy instead. He's gone for the Dunsparce to just try and limit what options David will have in his own game plan.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong turn 1 for Lugia. I think this is looking really promising.
Yeah, it does have that Lumineon in hand. I potentially might have liked to have seen the Lumineon being played first.
Because now it's shut off.
Yeah, it's always one of those catch-22 moments. It doesn't always pay off to maybe play the Lumineon down and grab the supporter. Which is a worry, and I think it might be something which will go through Tamao's mind, thinking maybe I should have just put this down. He does play Path, he can stop this from happening, and we do see a lot of players do go through that motion of both directions here, because he doesn't always want to bench the Lumineon, of course. It's an easy target.
Yeah, David's deck has a lot of flexibility with Disruption, though, so even if they did choose to bench that Lumineon, Marnie can still say, no, not today.
And what causes another issue at this, or concern for Tamao right now, is he does have an Ultra Ball in hand, so he can get the Pumpkaboo, but then he would have to potentially use Lumineon as another bench Pokemon, and then his board is pretty full.
Yeah, there's not going to be enough room for those 2 Archeops.
Yep, you don't need to tell me twice, unfortunately. Yeah. But there's the Quick Ball from David's side. We do have the Regidrago already down. The Regirock comes down as well. He's double-checked all of those Reggies that are available to himself, because none are prized.
No, here come all the Reggie friends. They're all seeming to soiree on the bench together ready. So David's making really good progress in getting that whole engine set up.
Yeah, now it's just down to how David's able to now maneuver his next turn. So he's going to scoop up net to get the Dragon's Horde, Regidrago in the active spot so he can draw some cards. It looks like free because he has one in hand already. Finds another Reggie.
There's Reggie Ice.
So it's the gang's coming together at this stage. There's only 2 more just hiding away right now, and there's a research.
We see
which
a Reggie
means
Drago hit the bin.
This is a really strong turn 1 from David right now, and could cause a number of issues for Tamal's side of the board because of that path to the peak being on the boards right now, just limiting what Tamal has access to. David doesn't look like he's insta-benched any Reggies as of yet. Baby has stuff like the quick balls, discarding a Marnie there. He's going to be looking to try and grab some of those Reggie Gigas or Reggie Steels.
Oh, there comes a Reggie Steel. The band's getting back together.
And all the rainbow color of all the Reggies are out now. So it's just the colorless Reggie still remaining to be found at some stage. And we do see the speed energy as well, drawing an additional 2 cards. It's such a strong turn for Reggies at this point.
It really is. Honestly, this is what I would imagine Reggie's ideal turn would be in this situation. They've managed to stop their opponent in their tracks and get their entire board set up.
And here it is. The whole gang is here, but of course, maybe just didn't have the energies in the discard. I think it's the final piece of the puzzle. But when you're already 80% of the way there, what more could you ask for?
And again, the single price decks don't necessarily need that hurried pace. They're okay to take their time. They don't mind.
And there's the retreat, attachment retreat with the DTE into the Lugia. Because of that Dunsparce, it won't be able to find a way to take a one-hit KO on this Lugia. Tamal will be looking to use Read the Wind here. And there's the discard of the Aurora to draw 3 more cards. And it's he's having to play with that consistency route. As I mentioned, did he top deck that Pumpkaboo? He top decked
the Pumpkaboo and a Professor's Research. So this might be a good turn.
Yeah, this might be a way sort of back into it, despite having that Luminion, which could have saved him a little bit earlier, as the clock is beginning to sort of trickle down at the same time. I imagine David here will look to try and use the Regieleki to maybe just keep applying as much pressure onto that Lugia as possible. Of course, not hitting for weakness because of that Dunsparce, but you know, just being able to start setting up that Lugia V with some damage is fantastic. And then we do see, you know, with the path already down, that Marnie path combo come into effect. And there's the discard of the Lightning Energies for 120 damage to the active and 40 to the Dunsparce and 40 to the Raikou.
Ooh, so starting to deal with those single prices as well. And if they manage to take them out on any extra turn, they're going to manage to take some bonus prize cards.
Yeah, we do get a chance to look at Tamal's hand. Ooh, double lost vacuum, but there's not actually much going on here. There's a powerful energy and an Arceus and a Charizard, but Tamal is really on the ropes because he's not drawn into any supporter once again. It's looking like he might have to read the wind to just try and find a way back into the game, or maybe to protect his board in some way. That another Regieleki attack will also knock out that Dunsparce, giving David 3 prizes at this stage on his next turn, as time looks to be called, with Tamal just giving a bit of an indication from that. And there's a Read the Wind once again. The Arceus goes into the discard. So with time being called, Tamal was turn 0. It passes back over to David, who will be turn 1. Tamal will have 1 additional turn, and then David will have his final turn of the game. And so David will be looking for a way to just maybe bench out Tamal, if possible, in his final 2 turns.
It'll be interesting to see what happens because they're both still on 6 prize cards, and with very little time to go, will either of them be able to take enough?
I'm just trying to work it out in my head as well. Even if David uses the Regieleki to attack the Lugia in the active, we'll take 2 prizes initially. Can target down that Dunsparce, which means that he's on 3 prizes remaining. But then we'll need 2 more attacks, really, to take out the Raikou and the Charizard. So I'm not too sure how possible it is right now. But let's see if there's some way for David to be able to do so. So there is the knockout on the Lugia. and the knockout onto the Dunsblast, and the extra 40 goes onto the Raikou, kind of just setting it up for another snipe attack as well.
We may see a trick up David's sleeve yet, but on to the next turn. And yeah, just that Charizard on the bench other than Raikou on the active.
Yeah, so this is turn 2 of time. Tamao will be just looking for one way of maybe just reducing the possibility of David able to sort of take free prizes or benching Tamao out right now. Does have Ultra Ball in hand, does have Boss, does have things like, I think I saw a Snorlax there as well. Goes for the Boss onto the Registeel, and there comes down the Snorlax with another big, beefy HP available as well. So at the moment, doesn't seem too possible. There's the removal of the Choice Belt from the Lost IQ, and it is turn 3 now. So Tamao's just saying, can you somehow take free prizes here? If not, then we're all good. And there's the fist bump. It's what a fun series we've had for our round 1. A really, really interesting matchup with Reggie's up against the Lugia V-Star. Really back and forth in game 1. Game 2, David's game plan of just kind of limiting what Tamao has available really worked.
Yeah, it did.
And game 3 looked like it was in David's favor. But at the same time, with single prize decks, they can sometimes take a little bit of time, and we have ended up in a tie. So that is 1-1 to both players. Both players taking away 1 point in their quest to try and make it into top 8 for day 2.
Not a bad start.
No,
not a bad
not
start
at all.
for either player. And generally speaking, I think it's mostly accepted that Lugia has a really tough time against the Reggie folks. So all things considered, I think that they both did spectacularly. Yeah,
I mean, after Tamao starting with that game 1 victory where everything's just both players able to set up, and Tamao's thinking, if we're both able to set up and I've been able to take a game, that means, you know, I have a real good chance here. You know, he's put himself in such a great opportunity, because it is, we say 50-50 in a bit of a matchup. Reggie's, if it does set up, does just push itself a bit higher.
Yeah.
But it's always that big if.
It's the if. It's whether it can actually get that hold on Lugia and lock it. And we saw that in game 2. That was absolute perfection in regards to disrupting your opponent and just stopping them from playing.
Yeah, exactly that. And then in game 3, we saw how quickly David was able to set up those Reggies. But yeah, that was a fantastic round. Thank you for joining me and Amy this morning for the start of our day 2 regionals block. And we are just going to go to a short break, and we will be right back with you as soon as possible.